The Ukrainian Defense Forces destroyed a base for assembling and launching Russian Shaheds on the territory of the airport in occupied Donetsk. And at the city council building in Pokrovsk, soldiers from the separate assault regiment Skala raised the Ukrainian flag again. In Kupiansk, the Ukrainian armed forces launched a counterattack and drove the enemy out. However, the situation in the city remains difficult. The enemy is trying to entrench themselves in buildings to amass manpower there and advance further. What is happening right now on the hottest fronts? Details coming soon. The world is on the brink of nuclear war. The Kremlin maniac is once again threatening all of humanity and has ordered preparations for a large-scale nuclear test to begin immediately. In response, the US conducted a test launch of the famous Minuteman III missile. And now news from Zabagadukhinsk. Mizulina and Shaman got married in the DPR wearing pseudo-camouflage outfits.
This product is proudly made by a premium French brand, renowned for its exceptional quality and refined craftsmanship. With a rich heritage rooted in France, the brand is celebrated for its dedication to excellence, attention to detail, and commitment to creating luxurious products that embody the elegance and sophistication associated with French tradition. They've set up the flanks and are clearing the city together with special forces, said the head of the assault units of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Valentin Manko. According to him, Ukrainian assault troops are doing everything possible to emerge victorious in the battle for Pokrovsk. Most of the attacks were repelled, and only the weather conditions prevented our assault troops from completing their work in this sector. The work continues, Manko added. At the same time, Russian forces continue to use armored vehicles in the area of Mirnorad. For example, the day before, the 38th Separate Marine Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, together with adjacent units, repelled a mechanized assault. Ukrainian soldiers destroyed 26 Russians and 3 pieces of armored equipment. In total, since the beginning of the month, the defenders of the Pokrovsk agglomeration have destroyed or disabled about 400 invaders. The Ukrainian Defense Forces destroyed a base for assembling and launching Russian Shaheds on the territory of the airport in occupied Donetsk. The commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, Robert Madyar-Brovdi, reported that destroying this complex target was painstaking work and the operation took several months. Meanwhile, on the building of the city council in Pokrovsk, soldiers of the 425th Separate Assault Regiment Skala restored the Ukrainian flag. What else is happening on the front lines? More in the following report.
The Ukrainian flag is once again flying over the city council building in Pokrovsk. It was returned to the building by assault troops of the 425th Separate Assault Regiment Skala.
We advanced into the building, cleared it, eliminated the enemy, and raised the Ukrainian flag.
The city council building in Pokrovsk is located in the southern part of the city, deep within the so-called gray zone. But thanks to the fact that the operation was carefully planned and the element of surprise, the soldiers were not only able to reach the designated point, but also complete their combat mission. Ukrainian forces are systematically destroying Russians in Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region and in the surrounding areas, said Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
There are also important results from our other units fighting in this direction. Our assault units, our drone system operators, our National Guard soldiers, the Military Law Enforcement Service, the main intelligence directorate, and of course all our brigades defending the Donetsk region.
Earlier, Artyom Pribilnov, head of the communications department of the 155th Separate Mechanized Brigade named after Anna of Kiev, reported that Russian occupiers had penetrated deep into Pokrovsk. Pribilnov shared that, according to data from the 7th Air Assault Corps, there are about 200 Russian soldiers in Pokrovsk.
Our brigade inflicts the majority of its strikes precisely on the approaches to the city.
Pribilnov said that not only the main intelligence directorate fighters, but all units present in the city are involved in clearing it of enemy soldiers. He admitted that it is the specialized units that are trained to operate in urban environments.
Urban warfare, believe me, is the most difficult kind of combat conditions. By the way, the enemy is not prepared for such conditions. Judging by intercepted communications, the soldiers who ended up as our prisoners, and the information from their phones, well, I wouldn't call them professional military personnel.
The serviceman added that the 155th Brigade of the Russian Federation Army was not withdrawn from the area because it was completely destroyed. The enemy increased firepower using reconnaissance and strike drones as well as glide bombs.
The enemy has completely changed the face of the city. Pokrovsk now looks like a ruin altogether. It's not even comparable to how it was this summer.
According to independent observers, about 80% of the territory of the city of Pokrovsk is either under the control of the Russian Federation or in the gray zone, meaning it is not controlled by anyone. Political analyst and military expert in the armed forces of Ukraine, Kirilo Sazonov, states that Pokrovsk, except for a small sector in the north and south, is now effectively no man's land.
Zavareva still hasn't been cut off. That's the most problematic spot. But in the area of Pokrovsk and Donetsk, warehouses burn daily, mines and shells explode, as do headquarters and fuel depots. This is the work of drones, missiles, and mobile groups from the SBU and all intelligence services. In the city itself, some people hold their positions, while mobile special forces groups move through the city and clear out those positions.
According to the Ukrainian General Staff, in the Pokrovsk direction, Ukrainian soldiers have stopped 100 enemy attacks. There is active resistance to enemy infantry groups trying to gain a foothold. The Pokrovsk Ukrainian Defense Forces are carrying out strike and search operations. On November 5th, the enemy launched 1 missile strike and 55 airstrikes on the positions of Ukrainian units and populated areas. In addition, they used 400 kamikaze drones and carried out more than 4,000 shellings of our troops' positions and populated areas. Ukrainian forces are fighting back against the occupiers. Aviation, missile forces, and artillery of the defense forces struck 2 areas where enemy personnel, weapons, and military equipment were concentrated, as well as an enemy artillery system. In the Pokrovsk direction near Mirnohrad, the Russians launched an assault. Taking advantage of bad weather, they tried to break through the Ukrainian armed forces' defenses using heavy equipment. Ukrainian soldiers repelled the offensive using fiber-optic drones, destroying several armored vehicles. Earlier, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces reported that there is no encirclement of Ukrainian units and formations in Pokrovsk. It is noted that the Russians continue to suffer losses in the battles for the city.
Putin removed Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov from key roles after unsuccessful negotiations with the United States of America. This was reported on Thursday by the Russian publication Kommersant, citing its own sources. According to the publication, the 76-year-old diplomat did not appear at the Russian Security Council meeting on November 5th. It was there that Putin instructed to prepare a proposal for resuming nuclear tests, which had been halted back in 1990. Lavrov was the only permanent member of the Security Council who missed this meeting. A source from the newspaper claims that the minister's absence was coordinated. However, his absence coincided with a number of unpleasant events for him. In particular, Lavrov lost his status as the head of the Russian delegation at the Group of 20 summit, which will be held this year in South Africa. The delegation will be led by Maxim Oreshkin, deputy chief of staff to the Russian dictator, and it was Putin himself who made this decision, according to Kremlin press secretary Dmitry Peskov. Let me remind you that Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov fell out of favor after the planned October summit between Russian dictator Putin and US President Donald Trump was derailed. At that time, after an unsuccessful conversation with Rubio, Lavrov once again started talking about the Nazi regime in Kyiv, demanded that the root causes of the conflict be addressed, and spouted more nonsense, which apparently even infuriated Putin. But the Kremlin maniac himself is once again trying to scare the world with his Oreshkins. This time he threatened new nuclear exercises. Full-scale launches are planned to be conducted at Novaya Zemlya. Only recently, Putin announced the completion of tests of the Burevestnik cruise missile with unlimited range and the testing of the Poseidon nuclear torpedo. Analysts call this a signal to the US, an attempt to force the United States to come to the negotiating table and accept Russia's broader terms.
The Minister of Defense of the aggressor state, Andrei Belousov, reported to the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, about US plans to deploy Dark Eagle missile systems in Europe and the Asia-Pacific region.
The flight time of such a missile from the territory of Germany, where it is planned to be deployed to targets in the central part of Russia, would be about 6 to 7 minutes. In
response, Putin instructed several ministries to analyze whether the United States is violating the provisions of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. In
the event that the United States or other countries that are parties to the relevant treaty carry out such tests, then Russia will also have to do so. Respond accordingly and take appropriate retaliatory measures.
Also at the meeting, Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu stated that it is still unclear what exactly the head of the White House meant by the phrase about resuming U.S. nuclear weapons tests.
We do not fully understand the future actions and steps of the United States of America regarding whether or not they will conduct nuclear weapons tests.
For his part, Belousov proposed to begin preparations for full-scale nuclear tests on Novaya Zemlya. Given
the above, I consider it advisable to begin preparations for full-scale nuclear tests immediately. The readiness of the central test site forces on the Novaya Zemlya archipelago makes it possible to carry this out in a short time frame.
Belousov also informed Putin that the United States is working on developing a new intercontinental ballistic missile called Sentinel.
With a new nuclear warhead, its range will be 13,000 kilometers.
Defense Minister Belousov's report came after Putin announced the completion of tests of the Burevestnik unlimited range cruise missile and reported the start of work on its deployment.
This refers to the testing of the Burevestnik unlimited range cruise missile with a nuclear power unit. I know that I have a report from the industry side as well, which is generally unknown. According to the Ministry of Defense's assessment, this is truly a unique product, unmatched anywhere in the world.
Soon after, he also announced the testing of the Poseidon nuclear torpedo, which, according to him, has no equal in terms of speed and operating depth. Analysts consider the testing of two powerful nuclear weapon carriers, the Burevestnik cruise missile and the Poseidon underwater drone, to be a clear signal from Moscow to Washington. By showcasing its nuclear arsenal, the Kremlin is trying to force the United States to come to the negotiating table and to accept Russia's broader terms which go beyond the scope of Russia's war against Ukraine. American President Donald Trump called Putin's statements inappropriate and reminded that the US has a nuclear submarine near the Russian coast, while emphasizing that Moscow should focus on ending the war against Ukraine. And on October 30th, the US president ordered the first nuclear weapons test in 33 years to begin. Let us recall that on October 5th, the US Space Force conducted a test launch of the Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile.
The Russian budget continues to lose revenue from resource rents due to falling oil prices, a strong ruble, and tightening sanctions. The Kremlin believes that the tightening of American sanctions, which have affected Rosneft and Lukoil, will inevitably bring new problems for the Russian budget, sources tell Bloomberg. The two largest oil companies in Russia account for half of the country's exports, and if you include Surgutneftgaz and Gazprom Neft, which have already been blacklisted, about 70% of Russian oil exported abroad is now under US blocking sanctions. To compensate for the collapse of raw material revenues and to cover the budget deficit, which could reach more than 10 trillion rubles over the next 3 years, the authorities intend to impose new levies on the population and businesses as well as sharply increase government debt. In other words, all hopes rest on China. In India, relatives of men whom Russia deceived into going to war against Ukraine staged protests. They were promised jobs and housing, but as reported, people were forced to sign contracts in Russian and sent to the front lines. Meanwhile, North Korea has already sent about 5,000 people to Russia to help with infrastructure restoration. According to South Korean intelligence, another 10,000 North Korean military personnel have been deployed near the Russian-Ukrainian border. South Korea estimates that at least 600 North Korean soldiers have been killed in Russia's war against Ukraine.
Protests have taken place in India over the deception and deaths of their citizens who were tricked into being sent to the front in Russia to fight against Ukraine. Dozens of families from different states in India are demanding the return of their loved ones and punishment for the organizers of the recruitment. According to relatives, young men were recruited through agents. These agents promised legal jobs with high salaries and accommodation. But instead, they were pressured into signing contracts in Russian and sent to the front lines with minimal training. The protesters held signs with photos of the young men in uniform. Some of them have died. According to media reports, the families of the deceased do not receive any compensation from the Russian authorities. One of the signs read, "Putin, stop killing innocent Indians." The story of one of the Indian students who signed a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense was told by his friend.
Yes, my friend, he did sign the contract, and after exactly 10 days had passed, that was it. I truly do not know where he is now or where he could have gone. It is hard to explain. His body, well, there is simply no body. There is nothing left, no sign of him at all. I have no idea how to describe it, but it is as if he just disappeared, leaving no trace behind.
Meanwhile, since September, North Korea has sent about 5,000 so-called construction workers to the Russian Federation to help restore infrastructure. This was stated by South Korean lawmaker Lee Song-won.
Around 5,000 North Korean construction troops have been gradually redeployed to Russia since September and are expected to be mobilized for infrastructure restoration.
According to the South Korean lawmaker, there have been ongoing signs of preparation and selection of personnel for the deployment of additional troops. At the same time, according to South Korean intelligence, about 10,000 DPRK soldiers are currently deployed near the Russian-Ukrainian border. South Korea estimates that at least 600 North Korean soldiers have been killed in the war in Ukraine and thousands more have been wounded. Analysts emphasize that the DPRK receives financial assistance from the Russian Federation, military technologies, food, and energy resources in exchange for sending troops. Thanks to this, Pyongyang avoids the consequences of international sanctions imposed on its nuclear and missile programs. In turn, the International Sanctions Monitoring Group wrote in its report last month that North Korea plans to send 40,000 workers to Russia, including several delegations of IT specialists. According to UN sanctions, DPRK workers are prohibited from earning money abroad. At the same time, two captured North Korean soldiers stated that they want to escape to South Korea. The Constitution of South Korea stipulates that all Koreans, including those from the north, are full citizens. This rule also applies to prisoners of war in Ukraine. It is known that about a year ago, the defense forces captured the first DPRK soldiers who were fighting against Ukraine in the Kursk region. The North Koreans did not speak Ukrainian, English, or Russian. Therefore, communication with them was only possible through Korean interpreters. At the time of capture, one of the foreigners had a Russian-style military ID issued in another person's name, registered in the Republic of Tuva, Russian Federation. The other North Korean had no documents at all. Additionally, Ukrainian intelligence has released new evidence of war crimes committed by international mercenaries from Colombia serving in the Russian army.
The terrorist state Russia continues to change its own laws to recruit reservists for the war against Ukraine. This week, Putin signed a law that allows reservists to participate in special training to guard critical infrastructure within the country. Despite previous statements by officials that reservists would operate only within their own regions, the new law contains no territorial restrictions. Despite claims of voluntariness, Russians fear that under the pretext of guarding facilities, the authorities are gradually preparing those who were not mobilized last year for war. The head of Russia's Safe Internet League, Ekaterina Mizulina, and the singer Shaman have registered their marriage. They came to Russian-occupied Donetsk to get married. Both of them are under sanctions by 27 European Union countries. Shaman is sanctioned for supporting the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and Mizulina for human rights violations and infringing on freedoms of expression. Notably, Mizulina, a champion of traditional values, for example, married Shaman wearing a cotton jacket from the premium French brand Yves Saint Laurent, costing 150,000 rubles. As for Shaman, for the ceremony, he apparently chose a shirt jacket from the same brand, costing over 160,000 rubles. Both jackets outwardly resemble military camouflage. You can learn more about the story of these two newly minted patriots in the next segment, and don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the Union YouTube channel.
The head of the so-called Safe Internet League of the aggressor country Russia, Ekaterina Mizulina, and the singer Shaman on November 5th demonstratively registered their marriage at the registry office in temporarily occupied Donetsk.
By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife.
For the 33-year-old singer, Mizulina became his third wife. The 41-year-old Mizulina had not previously been officially married. The couple is known for their outrageous actions and statements. Shaman previously caused a wave of bewilderment among Russians. He decided to congratulate Ekaterina Mizulina on her birthday in an original way. In the video, he and Mizulina are walking through the forest, after which the couple finds a large box tied with a ribbon in the colors of the Russian flag. Inside was the logo of a newly created party called We.
Ekaterina, for your birthday, I'm giving you something that no one has ever given anyone else in this world. I'm giving you a special celebration, and our party will be called We.
Ekaterina Mizulina is known for her anti-Ukrainian stance and her attacks on freedom of speech in Russia. She advocates for censorship in the Russian segment of the internet, initiating sanctions and fines for Russian media outlets. The Mirror notes that she seeks to eradicate criticism of the dictator, especially regarding the war against Ukraine. Mizulina has also repeatedly filed complaints with law enforcement against bloggers and musicians. For example, she previously filed a complaint with law enforcement against the competitor of her newlywed husband, Igor Creed. She didn't like his large-scale concert at Luzhniki. In one of her interviews, Mizulina criticized people who left Russia because of the war.
Some crowing roosters who loudly made a number of public statements, then left our country. For this, of course, we especially wish to thank our so-called Western partners, because this is, in essence, a cleansing of any undesirable citizens.
Earlier, State Duma Deputy Vladislav Dovankov demanded a report from Mizulina on the use of 200 million rubles from the budget. Shaman is one of the main performers of the so-called special military operation era. In addition to marrying Mizulina on November 5th, Shaman also became Singer of the Year in Russia for the third time in a row. Following him were Oleg Gazmanov and Sergei Lazarev. It is known that Shaman supports Russian aggression against Ukraine. He has performed concerts in the occupied Donbass and on the Crimean Peninsula. On his Telegram channel, Shaman posted a video with the caption, "Crimea is Russia." Also in February 2023, Shaman, also known as Yaroslav Dronov, was in the temporarily occupied part of the left bank of Kherson region, where he performed at a commissioned concert in support of the Kremlin regime. For supporting the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the singer is under sanctions from 27 European Union countries, Ukraine and Canada. On January 29, 2024, Mizulina was added to the sanctions list of 27 European Union countries for human rights violations and serious and systematic violations of freedom of expression.